Welcome back to the channel. A lot to unpack this week. Want to take an opportunity to go over the Bill of Renters' Rights, what it means for Canadians that are renting or want to transition to homeownership, but more importantly, what are some of the underlying problems that we see unfolding right here in Canada. We'll let you be the judge of it, but once again, thanks for stopping by. It is Friday, Finance Fridays, and I'm your host, Anthony with In Touch Mortgage Solutions. And if you have not subscribed to the channel, we invite you to go ahead and do so. Hit that notification bell so that you can be notified every single time we post a new video. As well as don't forget to share your thoughts, questions, and comments in the comment section below, and we will address them on a future episode. But let's take an opportunity right now and dive right in to what's happening over the last little while, especially with the introduction of this bill for renters' rights. And ultimately, you may remember the government introduced a similar bill for mortgage holders, and we're yet to see how these things play out. But I think before we get in there, it's important to preface what is leading up to this particular time and what we will see happening in the next little while. So as you may be aware, on April 16th, not only will we get the CPI inflation numbers, but we'll also be hearing from Chrystia Freeland and the Liberal government around their tabled budget. How much of a spend is going to be there? Is there going to be a deficit? And is there going to be any new spending, which can obviously be a lot more inflationary in nature, but we'll talk about that at another episode. But ultimately, as we lead up to this budget, we see the situation in Canada when it comes to immigration, the affordability crisis, the housing crisis. We hear all these crises that are exploding right now, and a lot of it has to do with the current government. I hate to say it, but 8 years ago, this administration was brought into power to address the housing concerns, and it seems that they have failed to deliver their promise to a lot of young Canadians, and it is only getting worse. Now, ultimately, yes, the existing government was handed a very interesting time with COVID and obviously inflation, but nonetheless, they had a lot of the data that they needed to really start addressing the problems. And on top of that, they decided that, hey, now is a good time to bring in millions of new Canadians into the country without having the proper infrastructure and housing in place, the actual developments for building these homes in place prior to the arrival of a lot of these Canadians. Now, it's important to understand that we are pro-immigration. We do need immigration. We need more skilled trades, especially in the health sector. As more Canadians arrive, we need more doctors and nurses. We need more skilled trades to help construct and build these homes as the aging construction workforce begins to retire. We need to increase the amount of family formation. We need more tax revenue from these individuals that are coming to this country to build a better life. But ultimately, we need to provide these individuals with the stability. We need to provide them with homes, not tents to live in. We need to provide them with affordable solutions to rent, not extremely expensive ones. That could deter a lot of new to Canada individuals. That can deter a lot of talent from coming to the country to help bolster this productivity here in Canada. What we need to help really build out the economy, much like the US, right? Where the US is business focused, we need a lot of this talent to come here. But ultimately, they're deciding, hey, right now, things are really expensive. Does Canada really look as good and as promising when you find rents are super expensive? To buy a home, you need a large down payment. You need to jump through hoops. And we have a government that's really not in tune with what's happening. They were warned in 2022 about the nature of these levels of immigration, and they did not yield that warning. And now they're throwing billions of dollars, hoping that this will solve the problem, get more shovels in the ground, but it's a little too late. By the time a project gets initialized, it can take years, months to get that project off the ground. And at the current moment, we have interest rates that are really high. We have workforces that are diminishing. We don't have the conducive environment right now to support a lot of builders. Yes, the government wants to build a lot of purpose-built rentals. Yes, they're throwing a lot of money at CMHC to get these things done. But the builders, at the end of the day, need to be on board. And once they are onboarded, well, it's not going to happen overnight. So this conversation is going to continue to play out. And this is why I'm saying a long time ago, they had the ability to really start hammering down on these projects. And really, they should have started the accelerator fund years ago. They should have thrown billions of dollars at these apartments and condos to repurpose them, to get them ready for rent. They should have been able to see all this on the wall, the writing on the wall a long time ago, and they failed to deliver. And now what I feel that they're doing is creating some slapstick type of remedy saying, hey, young Canadians, we're going to put in a Bill of Renters' Rights to help you become homeowners. Because if you do these things and if we do these things properly, well, that should help you transition. So now I want to take an opportunity to really break down some of those nuances of what is being conveyed by Justin Trudeau and the Liberals to help them create this Bill of Renters' Rights. Now, I want to be very clear. I'm not trying to play party politics here. It doesn't matter what side of the aisle that you are on, whether you vote for Conservatives or NDP or Green or Bloc, it doesn't matter. The idea around home ownership should be unanimous across all party lines, right? This is something that all Canadians should have access to: shelter, affordable housing. So this is where my beef comes in with this administration right now. As I listen to young Canadians, I hear and see every day the frustrations, talking to family members, young individuals that are saying, I don't see a life here in Ontario. I don't see a life in Canada. I need to leave either Ontario, move to a different province, or pick up and leave to a different country entirely. This is really sad as I think about myself and our family, our backstory, about how they came here to build a better life, and now their children and grandchildren are leaving to another place to form a better life in Canada, a place that we call home. So let's look at these Renters' Bill of Rights and really sort of break it down. First things first is the standardized lease, okay? So each province already has a lease, a standardized lease in place, like here in Ontario and BC. Other provinces have their own abbreviation of it, but ultimately a federal one would not really do much good, at least in my opinion, because each province regulates their own standardized leases. They underwrite the jurisdiction for rents and what they set as precedents. For example, Alberta is much different than Ontario. Ontario is much different than Halifax, for example, and Vancouver. So all these things are very important to understand. You're going to strip away power from provinces that are already feeling a little bit of pressure, especially some of these Western provinces where not many Canadians are too happy with this carbon tax right now, right? So now you're going to further strip them away from other jurisdictions, other abilities. I don't know. Let us know what you think in the comment section below. But that's the least of our worries, that one. Now, ultimately, the transparency one, where we're talking about, hey, as a tenant, you should be able to know what that property rented for in the past. And I believe this is good, but it's already tracked by rentals.ca. It's already tracked by MLS. Anybody with a phone, a smartphone, can find out what that property rented for just a little while ago. But what is that going to help with someone who's looking to rent in this market? If someone's renovated the property and now we're asking more, or the market itself is now determining that that property is worth more in rent because that's where everybody else is getting. And if you have 30 people lined up at one particular unit and are willing to pay ask price or more, if you're thinking about that, how is that going to help you negotiate? Is that tenant, or landlord, I should say, going to negotiate with you while there's 30 other people lined up ready to take that unit at fair market rent or more? I mean, that's a big problem. That's an even bigger problem than actually showing transparency and saying, hey, now you can freely negotiate, and that Canadians believe that that's actually going to happen. Now, the other thing is around the legal component of it. I think there's a allocation of a budget to go into legal aid for individuals and tenants that have been wrongfully evicted. And I do agree with this. I think landlords may, in some cases, take advantage of their tenants, but there's also tenants that take advantage of their landlords. So it's a balancing act. And yes, obviously, over the last little while, we've seen rent strikes, we've seen squatters, and the biggest problem, especially here in Ontario, is the Landlord and Tenancy Board. That's taken about 12 to 18 months to actually deliver or get a court date and actually deliver an actual judgment. And I believe that we should be focusing on getting that particular court system up and functioning at a reasonable time frame so that a judge who's already on the payroll can actually formulate a decision and pass down a judgment. Is the renter correct, or is it the landlord? And ultimately, the last thing, and I'll leave this at that point, is the actual credit. This is the big one. This is the one that I believe Justin Trudeau is really trying to make it sound like, hey, if you're renting and you're thinking about moving over to a home ownership, why doesn't your rent count towards your credit? And I do get it. I think that's a really good idea, but ultimately, is it going to benefit the renters? If, for example, what happens if they miss or are late on one payment, but they notify the landlord and all of a sudden they report it, for example? Who's reporting it? Is it a major company, major corporation with an administrative staff, or is it a mom and pop type of landlord, with that very small operation. How is this going to happen? How is it going to be transacted? Is it only going to be triggered once they miss a payment? And now this leaves a lot of things to be desired, a lot of questions on the table of how this will actually play out. But I think the biggest problem here is the false pretense to say, hey, this is going to help you with your credit, because if you're looking to buy a property, well, guess what? Now all of a sudden, all things are going to be solved, right? Your credit's going to be good. Now, 9.5 times out of 10, from my position here as a mortgage broker, when we work with clients that are existing renters that are transitioning to home ownership, it's not the rent. It's not the credit that is actually the problem. It's the other components that many Canadians are already facing. It's their income, it's their wage, it's their down payment. It's servicing the mortgage requirements, those income to debt servicing ratios, what we've talked about on the channel. In Canada, in most of the banks, they have a very strict guideline. That's not happening in the rental space, right? If you are making $100,000 a year, but you're spending 75% of it on rent and utilities, that's not factored in, right? You cannot be at those specific servicing ratios when it comes to qualifying for a mortgage. And right now, most Canadians, amongst most provinces, they're spending upwards of 55 to 65% of their take-home pay towards servicing either the mortgage or the rent. So this is absolutely a crazy problem, right? Affordability is at an all-time high. It's the worst it's been in a very long time. So when you think about an average Canadian spending 65% of their take-home pay just to cover a mortgage or even more on rent, well, we have a big problem. And then there's the down payment. What about qualifying for the down payment? In certain segments like Toronto and Vancouver, you can't really get into the market with 5%, right? Because if you put in 5%, that gives you a $25,000 down payment on the first $500,000. Anything over that, you have to put 10%. And if it's over $1 million, as we've discussed, you need to have a full 20%. So the credit is one part of the entire picture. So the fact that they're presenting this to Canadians to say, hey, this is the solution, along with more spending, more talk of spending tax dollars that are going towards maybe bureaucracy, maybe hiring more people that are going to be paper pushers to get these projects and permits. Who knows exactly how this money is being spent? All we can say right now is that the existing administration doesn't have a really good track record of spending tax dollars. When you think about things like $21 billion going towards consulting fees and why they need to spend that much money and how that money gets trickled down and whose pockets are really getting aligned. So whose pockets, I should say, are getting lined with cash in this country right now. So I really want to get your thoughts on this right now. And I'm a little animated because we hear all these conversations around Canadians struggling, and we hear it day in, day out. And I literally look at these particular measures and say, why would you do that? Why would you tell Canadians, hey, this is going to help you? Meanwhile, we know that the government doesn't have that track history. Look at, for example, the First Time Homebuyers Incentive Plan. This plan, when it was initialized, was the one where they look at your position and say, hey, you're buying, you're putting 5% down, we'll give you an additional 5%. If you're buying pre-construction, we'll give you 10%, but we take an equity stake in your home. That project was an epic failure. It was kiboshed and actually canceled not too long ago because it didn't do anything. It actually did not meet the needs of the Canadian people. Let me know what you think would be a better solution for the current government to help address these concerns, because we've said it, we need more homes, you need to get these shovels in the ground, and ultimately you have to get the builders on boards. If that means giving them better incentives to get those projects, better financing, better options, that needs to happen. If you really want to address affordability in this country, either wages need to go up significantly or home prices need to come down. So let us know your thoughts in the comments section below, but we'll leave the video here. Wishing everyone a wonderful Friday and an even better weekend ahead. Thanks again for watching.